Welcome to What CEOs Talk About. Do you wonder what CEOs talk about behind closed doors? How they bring their vision to reality? How do they overcome and succeed through adversity? We share that and so much more with each episode. Now, let's get started with the show.
Good day, everybody. My name is Martin Hunter. I am the host of What CEOs Talk About, where we translate strategy into frontline operations. Today on the show, Jason Mercer. Jason, thank you very much for being on the show. How are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm excited for this. Been kind of looking forward to ending my day, my Friday, with you and doing this.
Jason and I were talking before I got cancellation just before Jason, and I said, I got to hit the gym a little bit before our podcast, and Jason in his wisdom said, preserve the sexy, man. I loved it, man. 50-year-old white guy, you know what, dead sexy like a fat bastard
You're
says.
Never too old. It's both physical and mental, but the reason I say preserve, I'm very big on this. Justin Timberlake has a song called "Get That Sexy Back." I think getting it back is a lot harder than preserving. So I say get to your level and try to stay there, because once you come off that level, it's hard to get back.
I hear you. Oh, that's a good one. Oh, fabulous. Well, thank you, Jason. Like all the guests on the show, you've had the opportunity to think. We had a little bit of a pre-show a couple of weeks back, and I think it's important with the platform that we've got. What's the title that you would like the show to be today?
Sure. For me, the title would be, it takes intentional solutions for intentional problems.
We are going to dive into this. Jason, tell us a little bit about your story. Tell us, where are you from, all the way up to currently. Talk about your where you're raised, born, how you're raised, and then how you go up to being who you are and what the company you're at as well.
Sure. And I'll try my hardest not to make this sound like an interview answer, but I start this answer whenever anyone asks me. I'm very proud to be a kid born in Metro Detroit. One thing around that, I always say Metro Detroit, just because I have so much city pride. I never lived within the city limits, but my whole family did. If you know anybody from Detroit, it's a big thing where you like from the 313 or just outside. So I'm kind of just outside. And so out of respect, I always put the Metro in there. But I am a child of, like so many, of grandparents of the Great Migration. All four of my grandparents were born in either Arkansas, Alabama, or in Tennessee. None of them have high school graduations. High school. None of them graduated from high school. I think all four at some point were either their parents or were themselves sharecroppers. And like so many people, like in the 1920s, 30s, 40s. Moved up to, industrial towns in Detroit, Milwaukee, Chicago, because there were good jobs and those jobs did hire Black folk. And how that relates into Metro Detroit and growing up there is important to me. My family, worked hard to send my mother to college. She was born and raised east side of Detroit in a pretty, middle class for, at that time. My grandfather, worked as kind of a shoe shineman in the train station and then worked in the plants. Kind of jumping ahead, was actually the janitor at the, elementary and middle schools that I went to, which I thought was actually pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
And I guess I say that to say that working class mentality is definitely in me. But what is also cool in that is there was a sense of style and class that came from I think that Metro Detroit, first generation of Black folks to kind of have a little bit of money, have your Cadillac. And again, it sounds like we kind of joke on it now, but there is a swag and a style that I think people from Detroit have because of that generation. And I love it. I kind of mentioned they worked hard to send my mom to college, and I say that that's my heart, my soul. We're really close. And she graduated from University of Michigan, go Blue. I didn't go there, but I'm a huge fan. And, made a good life. Met my father. They didn't work out, but, that happens. I've had 2 kids, pretty much raised us in the suburbs, going to some pretty darn good schools. She was one of those people that, all she knew was education. I joke when people say, it wasn't until I really got to college that I didn't know college wasn't an option. Like I literally grew up thinking like you graduate high school, go to college, which is much different than, her generation. So that's kind of like that part. In high school, did a lot of the normal stuff, played sports, got pretty good at basketball, and ended up going to Morehouse, which is a historically Black school in Atlanta, Georgia. Played basketball down there, just loved it. I do think even in this global world of multi-races, going to a historically Black school for me was just amazing. You see really the diaspora of different, Black folk. And it's like any race. You mentioned you're Scottish. Not all Scottish folks are the same. You got, northern part of the countries and southern and western. It's no different from anything. So at Morehouse, you really got to see that and just made some great friendships. And I'll be honest, I think some of I really marvel at how well my friends are doing. I got some buddies, one of my buddies is on CNN all the time, is an elected official. We got some CEOs. It's really impressive. And I think that is one of the beauties of Morehouse and that culture is that for a couple since 1867 really is leading a lot of things in the Black community. So that's been amazing. After 4 years there, went and worked on Wall Street at Lehman Brothers, or the bank formerly known as Lehman Brothers.
Formerly known,
the bank formerly known as Lehman Brothers. I left kind of right before it went under, which was kind of interesting because the years right before were some of the best years the company had ever had. I did their 2-year investment banking program, but it decided to go on and do more like the managerial side of finance. And it's just weird when I think about it now. I was in New York in that 07, 08, 09 period where it was just a bloodbath. Get off the phone with ex-coworkers and everyone's just wondering, like, is this the day that I'm going to, get cut? It was a very weird time and to be in New York. So with the Warner Music Group, working their finance group for a little bit. After that, do what a lot of folks do when they're not sure what to do with their career, and that's go get an MBA. I was fortunate enough to get into some pretty good schools and decided to go to Stanford's Graduate School of Business out west. Absolutely loved it. I guess I'm saying this on wax, but I jokingly tell people, other than meeting my wife here in Chicago, leaving the West Coast might have been one of the worst decisions of my life. I just really like California, but I wanted to get closer to home. So 2 years at Stanford, loved it. Really got to see some of the venture capital kind of vibe out there. I think that's one thing that's interesting. The ethos of the school is just, I feel like a lot of places, it's more about taking over. We want to breed the next CEO. We want to breed the next, like it's a takeover mentality, which is cool.
Correct.
I think at Stanford, it's more like create the new. And that's a very different lane where you say, like, I see this really dope big thing over here and I could take over. I want to create the different one.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very different mentality. One that like I had not had in my really around me a lot, but I picked it up there and I think it's kind of coming into my soul later in my career as we'll get into. I'll speed this up a little bit, but after business school, went and worked at consulting for a few years, then more corporate strategy in the M&A space. And then now I find myself in venture capital leading, lead the due diligence process for a fund that is focused on making investments with a focus on Black, Latinx, and women entrepreneurs with a further focus on kind of the Chicagoland area. But we're doing some deals nationwide, and I just love it. It really feels like the culmination of, my investment banking, consulting, et cetera, background, where you're doing a lot of great things in those spaces to, I think, advise, but not always put a skin in the game. When you're in the venture capital world or the private equity world, or I guess even as an entrepreneur, it's skin in the game. Like what you're doing is not, giving someone a deck and some advice saying like, tell me how it goes. It's like, hey, we're going to do this. And we hope to have a significant return, in the future. And then to be able to do that with a focus again on the Black and brown community just means everything to me. So that was kind of long-winded. I hope that gives
No.
Hey,
How
we got here, but just loving it.
I love it. I love it. It's very important when we talk about feedback. We're big in when we optimize portfolios and, like you said, skin in the games. And we jump into the companies because people, equity firms hire us to clean up, or I shouldn't say clean up, somebody's got a great idea or somebody's struggling the explosive growth. And so they're young entrepreneurs. They say, okay, can you help these guys out? And we jump in and we say, absolutely, let's do this. I think that the importance of understanding the context of what we're going to talk about, because to just talk about something without context, to say, okay, it's blue. Okay, great. It's blue. Why is it blue? So it just gives a little bit more. So I think, no, thank you very much. I think it's very important for people to understand where you come from and where this conversation is going to go for the next, 40, 50 minutes. So tell us, why did you pick intentional solutions for intentional problems?
So I thought about this a lot because I knew I had a sense of where I wanted to go. Mm-hmm. And then I think as I started thinking about that, I was like, what is my point I'm trying to make? Mm-hmm. And I had spoken with you about this, is obviously talked about in my background, like doing things that is with a focus on the Black, brown community, just equity across, the world, in particular the United States where I live.
Of course.
Is important. And in really talking to my wife, it made me realize people often say something like, the system's broken. Mm-hmm. Or the way we do things are broken. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to call BS on that. Mm-hmm. I am very passionate about saying, no, the system is working exactly like it was intended to do. There were laws, regulations, you name it, that were put in place, since the kind of start of the U.S.
Yeah.
That, I'm an ex-athlete. I think about everything as like an advantage or a disadvantage, like from a physical nature. But you can take that to, applying to a country, a business, whatever. There are things that are done, and maybe you can say still being done, to give someone a competitive advantage and to give someone else a competitive impediment.
Yeah.
And once you realize and acknowledge that those are intentional, I think you can be a lot more around thinking through what are solutions. So for me, that is very much on like the issue of race. I think it can also mean the same for the kind of gender equity or, the LGBTQ, community. Is thinking through what are the intentional things that were created to be where we are now. And if you want to be an agent of change, how are you going to be intentional about doing that also? Mm-hmm.
There's my daughter is very math oriented. She wants to be an engineer and an interior designer. She's 13 years old now. And I looked into engineering schools and I look at the percentage of women that are engineers. And you look at the pay grade of engineers between men and women. And I said, no way. No way. So what can I do now? So I started joining, I started coaching, I started participating. I joined a group called Women in Mining and said, okay, help me understand. What can I do? And instead of figuring out or thinking things like, like you said, the system's broken. No, ask, go to the source and say, okay, what can I do? How can we talk about servant leadership? If we talk about the race issue, I think, Jason, in the pre-show, you mentioned something that I think is worthwhile mentioning again. You can't stand neutral. You can't say, I don't see color. I don't see this. I don't see that. You have to stand up and say, okay, like I'm 50 years old. I'm a white guy. What can I do? Like I said before, my wife, I'm so proud of being a father. I support my wife through her births. I was there, but I will never be able to know what it is like to pump a baby through my body. It's not. So I no matter how much I can say, hey, I support you, I will never be able to feel what it's like to walk outside and, as you mentioned before, be judged by the color of my skin.
Yeah, I think the way you describe it makes a lot of sense in that scenario with your daughter. And when I think about it, for like a business leader or any kind of person with a leadership in an organization, if you take the example you use with women in engineering, you could either just say, hey, as of today, I treat everyone the same. And, we'll just take kind of the best engineering folks we can. Because of things, years and years, like you're probably going to end up with a significantly more amount of males because this thing started in elementary schools decades ago. So
Yeah.
whereas what you're saying is, no, go to ask why. And then kind of think about, are there different places on the kind of, for lack of a better word, supply chain to women engineers where I can get involved? How in my organization can I say, hey, no, if we have 15 engineers, like we want to get to, some form of close to parity over the next 5 years, how do we think about doing this bit by bit? We don't have to get there tomorrow. This is fine.
Yeah.
But let's put a goal out there and go after it. So I think the way you thought about it is spot on.
So tell us, what are the issues that you're faced with? So you've got a platform here. Let's do a good, for the people who know EOS, let's do IDS, identify, discuss, and solve. What's an issue, Jason, that you're faced with still to this day, today, as being a Black man?
I think bringing it to career, or just in life in general, I'm all about like the math behind like the coin toss of like job hiring, promotion, etc. thousands of times over.
Okay.
So I'd say for me, I feel like, throughout my career, there's definitely been a time where I'm like, could I have got that job or not? Yeah, maybe. Could I got the promotion or not? Maybe. But fortunately, in my mind, my first thought is like, hey, I see the people in the room making it is not, anyone that looks like me or so few. So I think for me, that is one of my big things identifying is like understanding that representation significantly matters. So for me, it's like, how do I get into those rooms and then bring other folks? So I think that identifying and representation is definitely one. I think another one is just that fact of outside of the workplace, I'm me. I'm always going to be me. When I step out, I'm a tall Black guy. Like and that creates some situations. It doesn't create some situations. But that is just something that is constantly in the back of my mind, and that how that is going to be for my daughter when she I have a 2-year-old, when she grows up. Or if I'm fortunate enough to have another son or a daughter, what happens then? So I think that ongoing aspect of it, and how this gets better but slow, that's really on my mind. So I'd say those were the other two main things. And then I'd say third, and it kind of probably ties back to the first one, is as I continue with my career and get into a place of more and more leadership, really working with other leaders to say, what are we going to do to be a change? And I think that more goes to my title is I'm trying to talk to, folks and say, what are you doing to be a proactive, intentional change agent in this particular space? And again, I choose race as a big one for me, but
Yeah, of course.
think gender is just as important. I'll never know what it's like to be a woman just like you.
Yeah.
So I think those are the big ones for me.
Yeah, I mean, I've got so many anecdotes from this. When I worked with one of our clients, Tyson Foods, I was in Carthage, Mississippi, which a lot of people don't know is a few miles from where the event of Mississippi burning happened.
Ooh.
So very, very hot topic in regards to race as well. And so I'm with the general manager of the plant, and we just went out for lunch. So we drove from the plant to lunch, and we're heading back. And I didn't see the change in speed limit, so we get pulled over by a police officer who's a Black police officer. Me not knowing, I tell the plant manager who's Black, I say, "Hey, can you reach in the glove box and pull the registration out because it's a rental car?" He looks at me and he says, "Are you crazy?" I was like, "What?" He's like, "I'm a Black man in the South. I'm putting my hands up. I ain't reaching for no glove box." And it didn't even dawn on me. It didn't even come close to in my circuit of knowledge. And I find I'm pretty woke. I'm pretty alert. But it just didn't dawn on me. And I was like, damn. Still, right? And he's a grown man. He is a grown man.
Yeah.
So
Oh man.
it was dressed in Tyson Foods, clean shaven. He's just like, "I'm putting my hands up." I said, "Literally?" And so he did. And the police officer, and I noticed the police officer was Black as well. As soon as he put his hand on his pistol, I was like, "Oh my God, this is true. And
I
I'm
mean,
not saying that the police officer was wrong. Police officer was fabulous. He was kind. He recognized everybody at the exception of me. And you're like, okay, it is true. It is underlying intentional. That's how it's created.
yeah. I mean, it's funny you talk about that. I've definitely talked with colleagues. It's got a lot of press. I think in the last few years, they call it, the talk. What do you do? Without a doubt, I'm saying 7, 8, 9. Certainly, as soon as I started driving, cop pulls you over, all the lights on. I mean, you the windows down, hands on the radio down, hands on the steering wheel. Like it is just it's ingrained.
It's an automation. It's a.
Oh yeah. It is funny. It definitely has me thinking of a story. Again, it's one of those things like you just never know. But I remember when I was in investment banking, we were out. I think we were celebrating a deal or something like that, and we were out at kind of a bar. And I do remember, and I'm kind of embarrassed by this, but like we weren't rowdy by any means, but it was like our whole group. But I do remember at one point, like, being asked to leave. And I don't think it was because, like a racial thing, but it was more, I think we were, there was like a junior person who I think like they got in trouble, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And eventually I think they were like, we have to pick it. Now, it is very possible they're like, this is kind of the group and the tall guy is the easiest one to do it. But I just remember him coming and be like, you got to go. And it was kind of like all of you, but it was like him. And it was like kind of aggressive, not like in a terrible way. More than anything, what I do remember is like the embarrassment of the moment. And in front, it's like, and I'm young. I was probably like 23 at the time. Being with like the managing director, all this stuff, I just started bawling, crying. And they were like, what's happening? I was like, I've tried so hard, like not to be in this position. Again, there's a lot of reasons why the bouncer might have chose me. But without a doubt, my mind was like, it's kind of like the SAT question, you know? It's a group of us, and one is just so different. Like, who are they going to pick to kind of make an example of? And I just remember, then I'm embarrassed now. I'm crying in front of my freaking boss. And I'm huge, not huge, but a big dude. And I just remember, like, that was one of those things that it could have been any reason, but I know for me being like, wow, like I am now, like in my mind, like I become a statistic. And nothing bad happened. We left, something else. But in my mind, I was like, I try so hard not to be this. But now I'm the black guy getting kind of like pulled out in front of all these groups. Like again, it's those small things that like the shame that I had. So I mean, but again, being young, you learn, but like it's that kind of always on your brain that kind of just makes it difficult.
I think one of the things that we need to do is we need to call it when it's there. So one of the clients that I served we're with the young marketing group, and most of them are female, and I've been working with this group for 2 years now, and plant-based and super, super in the zone, explosive growth, great marketing team. And they said, yeah, in my previous job, I don't want to do this anymore, but I had to present to old 50-year-old white guys that didn't do this and didn't do that. And basically she's describing me, and everybody on the Zoom call is kind of looking awkwardly. And I said, hey, I'm 50. I'm white. I've corporate executive. She's like, but Martin, you don't fit in that. And so I said, then don't judge the attitude. Don't associate a color, gender, or a race to the attitude of being closed-minded or fixed mentality, right? Don't put all the old white guys in the same box. Don't put all the ladies in the same box. Don't put all the black guys in the same box, right? And I think that we need to call it out when it's there and call it out in a polite way, like asking questions. I mean, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was great.
I had the first time that I was truly exposed to the Southern culture was in Louisiana. I'd go down there again with Tyson Foods or BNSF Railways, and there's this place I used to always go to, and in closer to Texas. And I love shrimp etouffee. And this lady was amazing. She had so much history. She was a big black woman with a huge laugh. And I would sit down with her and she would tell me, because there's so much history in the South of the US with so many things that happen. I would just sit and listen. And I think that is the key thing, where she would be so kind to me. She'd text me and she'd say, hey, when you come into town, sugar, because I'm gonna make you some shrimp etouffee just for you. So there's there's so much that can be, so much of the gap that can be closed when you just, pardon my friend, when you just fucking listen.
Yeah.
So the opportunity for you. So give us another one. Give us something that you feel that, is there something that you feel that we could change right away? Something that you feel that a CEO, if you've got the microphone now, you're talking, listening, on average, we've got between, 1,000 and 3,000 listeners to this show. And most of them are CEOs. What do you tell these CEOs? What do you tell them? What can they do differently?
Great question. It's
because a lot of
it's simple, but it's not simple. As I say, if this is a issue or a topic you truly care about, you got to be proactive. You got to be intentional. Being neutral or saying that you're neutral is not going to cut it. And I think the big things I've thought about a lot, this gets to what we do at Cleveland Avenue and Cast Us, is kind of the hire and wire. And that's kind of more for the investment field, but it can be used for anything. Take a look at who you hire and what you do once people are in your organizations, and where you put your dollars towards. So for us, that's investments. If you're at your own organization, it could still be investments in talent, investments in this. It could be compensation, but take a true look at it. And I say this over and over and over. If you do it over some time, it's not that hard. Again, I can't speak for every organization, but you probably got some information on promotions, compensation, who's come in, who's not. Look at that. If you start to look at it, and at the very least you say, hey, I'm an organization of 100, and across the board, very few managers, directors, VPs, SVPs, we have very few women. We all look like this way. We all look that way. I think you have to say, why is that? And if you think through, are we intentionally doing it?
Let's ask the question, because I'm sure that people. So let's say there's 4 guys applying for a job. Okay. Well, let's say a little bit more. Let's say 10 guys are applying for a job. 10 of them are white, 1's black. And you have a CEO that's very intentional of increasing his diversity. And he says, well, I've got at least 4 guys that I feel, and through our assessment, are 4 white guys which he thinks are stronger than this black guy. What does he think? What does he do? He doesn't want to be seen as hiring unfairly, but he or she wants to increase diversity. What are your thoughts? So you don't have a solution, but what are your thoughts, right?
So I think I have to go back to your point around as a context. Obviously nothing's exactly black or white.
Yeah.
Pun intended.
Yeah. No, I gotcha.
Size of organization matters a lot. So let's use your example. Say this organization does have, 50 plus, maybe 100 people. It may not be a Fortune 500,000 people, but enough where they know they're going to hire a few people every few years, fairly regular. They can plan it. Now, again, if you're a 5-person shop hiring for that one person, I think that's a very different situation. We can come back to that.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you are a nice, sizable organization where you hire regularly, don't make this a one-off game. I say you set a goal. You set a goal and you say, hey, what does our team look like? So same example. Take your example, big add it. That person has 20 people in his, senior to mid-level management, between CEO down to, a director that has some P&L power, but 20 people that are that's the leadership organization. If you're 20, is nowhere near kind of your local demographic. I'm getting kind of math, but like, whatever. Let's make an example. That your 20 is all white, 17 out of 20 are male.
Yeah.
You got to look at that and say our numbers are crazy, not normal. Not even normal. They're just wrong. Disproportionate. Yes.
Yeah.
In that organization, if you're hiring for one person, that's one thing. But that leader should say, if I have a goal to be, let's be kind of, conservative. I want to be at least a third women in the next 5 years. And I at least want to get up to 25% Black or brown. Mm-hmm. We got 5 years to do it. I am putting some power behind executive compensation behind this. When we're hiring, we want to make sure we're going to different sources. But this is our goal, and that's at 5 years. And then so you bring that back. You say by the end of year one, if we are at 5%, we want to be at 10%. And you start breaking down those goals and thinking about when you hire. So when you get to this one position here, you are saying, okay, maybe there's one. If the four other are clearly better, I say go with one of the four that are clearly better white guys. But as part of your intentional plan, how do we start building that pipeline so that the next time we get one of our top four is Black? Because what I will say, if you are truly being intentional, unless one person is a rock star among rock stars, and personally in my experience in business, it's really hard to tell that. We're not talking sports where Michael Jordan scores 30 points and you know exactly why he's better. In business, it's kind of like you usually probably have different versions of really good.
Yeah, I agree.
If one person isn't clearly better and you got four versions of very good, I do say take the brother that's very good.
Yeah.
And because you are thinking about this as a 2-year plan, 3-year plan, 4-year plan, and you know you're going to have at least 10 hiring decisions in that time, you're not making it a one-off like, oh gosh, we're not doing this, but you are saying some degree of we know we want to go. And now you're thinking about it from that perspective. And you're also saying, let's build a pipeline. Let's learn where to go. Back to your kind of women in engineering. What are the best places to go get talent? Who's cultivating this talent? How do we do that? Maybe we do have to compensate a little bit more to go get a great talent that's different.
It's okay. It's okay. I mean, it is absolutely brilliant what you're saying, because the way that I described it was very transactional, very in the box. Hey, here's one component without context. What you're saying is be intentional. Don't look at that event in singularity. Look at that event in the grand scheme of being intentional, like any other goal that you want to achieve. That is absolutely brilliant. And look at what you gain from just asking the question, which I would have not thought about. Say, okay, right, let's increase the numbers. We want to increase sales. So what do we want to do to increase sales? We want to increase and look at the demographics of who's around us. Let's have a very clear reflection of what that looks like. That absolutely fabulous suggestion, idea, and direction. Well done.
Yeah. And I think you talked about it from like sales, and that's kind of actually how I think about it. It's a pipeline thing.
Yeah.
And it's a fostering of that. So, and I'm big, and I realize all the media is like, oh, we got to change tomorrow. Business doesn't work like that. Life does it. But when you start thinking about things in a 3-year plan, set some goals. You're going to miss some, you're going to make some. So again, I say, using this mythical, we're going to get to be 33%, women. If that's a 5-year goal, is 10%, it might take some time to get started because you do have to build a pipeline. If you're at 5% today, is 10% at the end of year 2, good. And maybe you kind of try to ramp up from 10 to 20 pretty quickly. Like, you set that, but I also do think if you're a leader, you set it and you make it fairly public. I think your organization needs to know. At the very least, your top leadership team needs to know. And I think now it becomes kind of whether it's tied to compensation, how do you think about it? But if you are not putting out, no different than you have, we're in the investment field. We look at, things. What's your 2021 plan? What's your 2023 plan? Every projection is wrong, but what we can do is do some kind of, varying degrees. If you said you're going to be a $15 million company by the end of 2023, and you're at $2 million at the end of 2023, we got a big problem. We got a problem. If you say you're going to be 15 million by the end of 2023, and you're at 11.5 by the year of 2023, we're not exactly like clapping hands, but like we're like, all right, we got
That's possible. There's hard work
talking
to
about, especially if you're now like you're backing it up and saying, hey, we misplan, but a mixture of here's why, but even more than here's why, here's our pipeline.
There's a story. It's like a brand. It's an employer brand. The previous guest that I had was all about HR, and how do you build your employer brand? Because finding resources is difficult nowadays. So tell me if this is wrong. Okay, so I'm the CEO of an organization. Again, what do we say? 50 employee plus. We've got a budget for development. And I say to my HR team, I've got a plan and I want to increase to that, 33%, 25%, 23 women and 25 black and brown. Okay, great. Hey, our VP of finance just quit. I want you guys to find me a black VP of finance. Is that wrong to say or to ask? Is that derogatory? Is that the wrong way of addressing it?
I don't think it's wrong. So, okay, I guess one thing, my general premise, obviously I have some stake in this game. I'm always betting on black. I'm always saying like that's not a bad plan, but you've got back to being transactional. So I would hope that person, when he does do that, he is saying, A, I'm going to pay top dollar because I might have to go get someone. Yeah. And then B, if they were already thinking about it, I wish they would have kind of some pipeline. But in your situation, someone just leaves, you probably don't. And they are saying, I want to be someone of talent. Because what I don't do, I do not want a non-talent person in that.
Yeah, of course. Yes, yeah.
So, but I do think if they are using a headhunting firm or telling his HR firm, they're saying, this is my target. But you don't put the business at risk. So I think within range, I am perfectly for that. I still would say, hey, this is a near-term problem. And it essentially becomes a people version of a fire drill. Figure it out. I'm cool. But I will also get back to what I said before. Step back, handle that. How do you do that plan? Because I do think if it wasn't a black person and I heard that was the case, I'm not too happy about that. Whereas at the other side, I think if I'm in an organization and someone's like, look, here's our numbers. We have a 3-year, 5-year, 6-year goal. Like we're not changing it tomorrow, I think it looks a bit different. And here's another catch that is always, situational. You're hoping this is a growing organization. I think that's another, I guess I didn't put it to this. When you make this a different pieces of the same size pie, it kind of becomes zero sum, or at least that's what people think about it. I think that's one of the scariest parts about these conversations is if you're not in that focused group, if you are a mid-level person and you wanted that VP role and you've now been told 3 out of our next 10 VPs are not going to look like you, you're like, I'm not competing for 3 roles, I'm competing for 7. The math changes. But when you're a growing organization and someone's like, well, no, we're going to grow and we're not having 10 VPs. We're now going to have, 20 in 3 years. We just want some people are. Then at least people at least can think, we're changing. So that's a completely different kind of view, but it does framing from the top down. Leadership matters a lot. So to answer your question directly and what you're saying, I'm all for it. I don't think that is ideal, but it's an intentional solution to an intentional problem.
And I think, like we said it at the beginning, is we put context behind it, right? So I took this context, I took this action without context. And if you've got, like, you start from day one, right? So you go back to the organization, you say, hey, listen, I listened to the podcast, what CEOs talk about between Martin and Jason, and here's what I heard. And from now on, we're going to build this in our plan, okay? And then that CEO lady goes and says, yeah, absolutely, let's do this. And 2 days later, the VP of finance quits, and she says, okay. So as long as the context is there, and like to your point, I mean, you don't want to hire, a black plumber because he's black at the role of VP. It's not fair to everybody else, and that just creates more havoc and more animosity than anything else. Yep. If you tell your team, hey, listen, I don't mind paying the extra for you guys to do the extra legwork, but find me somebody of quality that we could bring in at the executive level, or at least interview them, have them build a pipeline, right?
Yep. And you got me thinking of kind of another point I was thinking of. So I'm going to say 2 points in this. One, I acknowledge it's not easy. And I really only have one really, really good example of this. There's a firm called Medallia out of Silicon Valley. Their CEO has essentially created this challenge and has made it very public. If you go to, we could put the link up, like they have it on their site, and it's like, we have a 5-year plan. And I think it's like, we want to be at 6% by the end of year 1. We want to be at 10% by the year 2. So like he's breaking it down. It doesn't say exactly how it's tied to executive compensation, things of that nature, but they broke it down. And that's one, fairly large company that I've seen do it. And I think we're going to see more, get into that space. So I think that's really awesome.
I know Colliers. Yeah, Colliers in the real estate. I interviewed the VP of HR, and they've got a huge diversity target that they're looking to build as well. And again, she reports to 2 CEOs, one in the US and the other one in Canada, and they've both said the same thing. Okay, so how do we fix it? How do we make this better? And they've got aggressive targets, which I think is good. I think that it draws up, as you said, this intentional cap, I guess is the word, that's been happening for so very long. And I mean, it's funny because, people will say, well, okay, Blackfoot, it happened to Italians. It happened to Irishmen that came back in the 17th century, right? 17th, 18th century. They came over, and because they were Irish, they were not from the island. They were treated like slaves. Because the Italians came over, they called them wops, and wops meant without papers. And because they didn't speak English, like Irish, Scottish, and English and Welsh, they were segregated. So the same thing is happening. And what I have a hard time with is how long it's taken to come up to this conversation, which is atrocious in my opinion.
So on that, and I don't want to dive too deep in that unless you want to, because I could go there. I do think, unfortunately, the simple fact of skin complexion matters a lot. And a lot of the cases that you mean, very true, especially here in the United States. I mean, like it was bad for all the kind of people of those origins you were talking about. Give or take a generation, some learning of English, some learning of customs, you eventually become white.
Agreed.
That's not going to happen with me. So, and we've seen other cultures, been able to do that. So that's another subject, at least for me. The other point that I think is important is we talk about this thing around pipeline. And it goes back to my point around intentionality. Within any given industry or whatever, there are groups that can help you with this. So I remember, and it might have been like a CEO gaffe of sorts, but the CEO of Wells Fargo, I think this past summer, whatever, was like, we can't find enough like solid Black talent. To me, as a CEO, you can't say that because it sounds like I'm a sports guy. If a head coach of a college program or whatever saying like, I know, like, you need to know what camps players are going to. If I coached a sport, I would know where the best 14-year-old quarterbacks in the country are, who's coaching them. It's a little bit easier with sports because, there's metrics and things like that. But my thing is, whether it's business programs, engineering programs, schools, nonprofit organizations, it's not easy. And I keep saying it's not easy. But if you're going to have to be intentional about learning those things, learning where to go. And I think that is what gets difficult is if you just do what is normal, is natural, and it's probably a little less expensive on the front end, which again, business is business. Mm-hmm. But that's the non-intentional way. That is saying I'm being neutral and I'm going to
agreed.
But if you, to your point, going back to the kind of situation you create, if you're not telling your head of HR or whoever's doing that to go, and yes, it might be a few more hours for you, whatever. Like it's going to be some work, but find the programs. Let's build the pipeline. Where's the junior person? Should we start an internship program? And for the internship, be even more specific. That internship is for these groups, more women, whatever. But that athletic mentality of, if I'm a coach and I need to field the best team, I know the youth camps, I know this, I do that. That's how it is. If you are a leader and you're not doing that, and you're kind of just interviewing the people that come to you, that's a problem. That's regardless of race, that's a problem. But
no, I agree that, I mean, that's a fixed mindset, regardless of, it's hard to find talent. Well, okay, how hard is it to find business? What's the difference? What's the difference between hunting for clients or hunting for candidates? There is absolutely no difference there. And that's just, I think what people tend to forget, that as a leader, the job is very simple. If you want to be transactional, you can be transactional. Here's the outcome that I want you to achieve. I don't care how you do it, just do it. And you don't care about anything else. If you're truly, honestly, a servant leader, then you have transformational skills. And those transformational skills start with facilitate the work, elevate, and celebrate. And facilitate the work. To be able to facilitate, you have to ask questions. How do I make your job better? If you don't start listening and start asking decent questions, there is no stupid question, in my opinion. Look at all the questions that I'm asking you. You can't know if you don't ask the question. And by asking the question, then you listen, intentionally listening, and say, okay, how do I solve this problem? How do I facilitate this situation or this target? Then you elevate. You say, okay, great. What resources do I need to throw at this to elevate the organization? And the best way to elevate the organization, and there's no robotics that take on 100% of businesses now, to be able to do so, you have to elevate the people within the organization. And then you celebrate when you achieve a target that you've worked hard towards and people are getting there. Even a small win's a win. A W is a W. You won. If you won 152 to 151, it's still a W. It's just 1 point different, but you still got that win. You still got that W. So I think it's, as you're saying, like you've opened my eyes in regards to how to really think about this. The title fits absolutely well the conversation, Jason. Well done. Well done.
I appreciate that. And so one thing I think about when I talk about this is sometimes I struggle with this person. This is kind of funny maybe. The other kind of thought I was thinking about from a title is I'm not that special. And it goes back to, again, I keep coming to the same things and people are like, man, he sounds like a broken record. Is that pipeline conversation? Mm-hmm. I know I have been in rooms where people are like, oh, wow, Jason is special. And for me, I'm just like, you just haven't met enough Jasons. And I do think I'm pretty special, but there's programs that literally, and there's groups that are, create a lot of these, especially in the business. Well, won't say business, especially like in the finance world. And maybe I know that, and this goes back to my kind of coach, because I kind of came up in that world. I know where those are. So it's easy for me to say, go point to them. But I'm like, again, if you're a leader, you care, you find out how to do that. And it could just be like, Jason, you tell me where to go. And now I figure out how to go do that. But so that was kind of a funny thought. On my other one was, as much as I do want to think I'm special at times, I'm like, no, because I'm not. And I think there becomes that, unfortunately, I say, a lot of companies want their own Barack Obama. He is special, by the way. But I think if you try hard enough, if you're really looking, you'll find a lot more talent in that space. It's kind of general thought.
I've played rugby all my life. When you die and go to heaven, you play rugby, eat steak frit, and drink Guinness beer. That's my heaven, right? Not bad.
I like that.
Rugby is not as growing sport because finding boys and girls that want to have that contact without protection is fading away. So what you have to do to build a strong rugby A team is you have to start in elementary schools. You have to start building that pipeline that you're talking at the elementary school. You have to talk to the coach and say, hey, coach, can I come in, once a month and do a little bit of rugby, touch rugby. And then you move on to middle school and you move on to high school and then college. And then all of a sudden you've got yourself a rugby club that's got a pipeline full of athletes. Now, not everybody's going to make the A team. Not everybody's going to make a Div 1 player. That's not the point. but at least you've got a pipeline of people who can play rugby at different levels that match the intentions and values of the game. And
Yeah.
what you're saying is no different. Go reach out. Okay, fine. I don't know. I'd have to look at data, but you'd say, okay, what is the one profession that has the least amount of Black people? I would not know the answer to that. But let's just say, I don't know, astronaut, to pick something. Okay. Well, let's start building an astronaut program that reaches as far back as elementary school to be able to target some of the communities that are Black and say, okay, let's start building an astronaut project. Hey, listen, look at the stars, astronomy. You know, we look at physics, we look at engineering. You look at all those things so that they're capable of at least providing or developing a structure that facilitates Black people to become an astronaut. I
Yeah.
don't know.
So two interesting things there. One, fully agree. Two, learned a little bit about rugby. I worked for a New Zealand company, and that's how the country is. Whereas if you're in the United States and you're, run fast and really strong, you're probably playing football.
Yeah.
Over there, you're playing rugby, and they got some big, fast guys over there. I'm just like, that guy's a middle linebacker if he grew up in the United States. But they did what you said. They their young youth development programs are incredible over there for the sport. So that's kind of funny because I know just enough about rugby to be dangerous, but you won't get my skinny butt playing that game.
Well, this bends when it shouldn't bend. My ear doesn't bend when it should bend. I've got a fake hip. There's a whole bunch of things that go on. I'm actually 25. I just look 50. Jason, what is? Oh, sorry.
This one is, and I apologize coming back to it. Is
so
your example is kind of get like at the macro level. What I think is important in something similar to that is on the business community leader basis, small decisions played out thousands of times, it would create change.
Well said.
And that is the thing where I say as a business leader, like, I think it's easy for someone to say, okay, I'm only, 10 people in my company, but that's a big United States problem, or that's a big Canada problem. My thing is if, the leadership, if you're 10 and that happens 100 times, you get to the results. So
Agreed.
We're talking about macro problems that are solved at the micro level, and that micro intentionality, I hope, will lead to macro results. And again, I acknowledge it's hard, but to me, that's how you got to think about it.
Agreed. I mean, I volunteer my time as the chief operating officer for an organization called Mission Possible, where we take people from the downtown east side of Vancouver, which is like Skid Row, and the people that want to get back into the work environment, we help them build a resume, find lodging, get out of their addiction, and be what they would view as contributing member to the economy by finding them work and like I said, facilitate their reintroduction, elevate them as human beings, and celebrate each win that they have. So by tackling every opportunity and every human being, like you said, one at a time, I think it's the U.S. Postal Service 10 years back. He says he changed the mindset of the organization. He says, instead of processing 10 million pieces of mail a day, how about we process one piece of mail well and repeat the process 10 million times?
Exactly.
And so that I think is very, by having a bigger contextual understanding and then not being transactional like I was. So there's a lot of learning today. Jason, what's the piece of reference, a book, a coach, something that you feel that you always go back to, either in business or in life, that you go, hey, this is the book, or like I said, a coach that said something to you and that you honestly live every single day and that you refer to?
That's a really tough question. I'm gonna take a moment to think about it.
Take your time. So when I was in the Army, So I've got a book, but for today, I think that a good mentor is key. One of the key mentor was a warrant officer, and when I was leaving the Army, he said, "Remember this. Okay, there's three things that you have to remember in life. Number one is always take care of your mental and physical health." I say, "All right." Number two, take care of your family and friends, that in order of priority. And number three, every fucking thing else. and that to this day still resonates with me, where I go, okay, if I'm not mentally healthy, if I'm not physically, if I'm not keeping the sexy, to quote Jason, then who am I? Who am I to help other people? If I don't take care of my own, if I don't take care of my family, if I'm not a good father, if I'm not a good husband, if I'm not a good brother, if I'm not a good friend, then who am I to serve my society? So if I take those two things very, very seriously as a human being, then everything else will come naturally. So that's a piece of advice that I got.
Yeah, so I will take this your question is just slightly different way. I don't think I got the exact advice, but it's something kind of become like a mantra of sorts to me. It's kind of like it goes along a lot with what you said, but like the step process, like I'm very big and probably to some degree of selfishness of I got to be tight. I got to be good, whether that's mentally, spiritually, you name it. But I do believe like if Jason isn't being my best self, it's hard for me to be there for others. And then so the next focus to that would be my family. For a lot of my life, that was like, my mom. I mean, it's still my mom, grandparents, other stuff. But now that I have a family of my own, it's a little bit different. And I want my family to be strong, to be tight, to be good. And as I'm doing that, the next part is like the community. For me, a lot of time that's the Black community, but it could be in my greater community, my job. It's the people that are outside. So it's like those continued circles. And I hope that one day it becomes like, the world, and maybe to some degree it already is, but I don't feel that way. But like to me, that step process, and for me, very intentional. If you can't say, I like that word a lot. Very intentional about like that step process. And I say sometimes it has been in my life probably a little, selfish, but I'm like, I'm very big on. I can't say, put your mask on your face first. And get yourself to be the best you could be, to get your team to be the best you could be, to get your community. So I guess that mantra of like, what can you do to improve yourself? And then once you feel you're in a pretty good place, you never stop improving yourself, but you can start to take on more people. And I think that starts with your family and then goes on. So I think that's kind of a mantra. The other one, and I hate to sound quite cheesy on this, is I think I said I grew up kind of in the suburbs of Detroit. I'm very big in I guess this is weird to say, I have a tattoo that I quoted is Luke 12:48 from the Bible. Okay. To whom much is given, much is required. That's kind of how I live my life. It's also weirdly Spider-Man's his mantra.
Yeah. With great responsibilities.
I'm big on that.
Great powers come with great responsibilities.
Great powers come with great responsibilities, and call me arrogant, whatever you want, but like I feel like I got some power. I've been blessed with a lot of things. And as I grow more power, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. So that's something that I'd say from a pretty young age. My stepfather literally, won't say he beat it into me. That's bad. But,
he beat it into you.
His own way. But he was really big at a very young age. Like Jason, like people don't have what you have. They don't have your talents. You're like, and it's kind of crazy because you're like, you kind of start believing your shit don't stink and the world kind of lets you know it stinks. But he was very much, he's like, you got to do something with this. I'm huge on that. And everybody has their own talents, their own gifts, so it applies to everyone. But there are some people that have, whether it's a platform, talents, whatever, with great powers come great responsibility. So that's probably my other one that is, really, really big. And like I jokingly said, I put it in my flesh. Maybe not the best decision ever, but it truly is a reminder on my body that Luke 12:48, too much is given, much is required.
Well, I think that what it brings is gratitude and humbleness. I think that you can be proud and humble at the same time. I mean, pride is very double-edged sword. Yep. But there's nothing wrong in celebrating and recognizing what you're good at. I mean, your superpowers, like you said, if you're grateful for what you've got, then you will never be oppressive, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And that is the key thing. There's nothing wrong in being a superstar as long as you're not oppressive or hurting anybody in the process. People will always be jealous. People will always be jealous of what you can do because they don't have that same gratitude that, like you said, you got and kind of, instilled in you, to not say beaten in you, but it was instilled in you by pecking you in the head, saying, remember this, remember this, remember this. I tell my kids all the time, hard work pays off. And not necessarily to work your fingers to the bone, but when you are involved in work, give it everything you got. You don't, and no is no. There is no maybe, there is no try. If you ask my kids all the time, what are 3 words that you cannot say in my house? But, try, and can't. So those are the things that I agree, man. Any last words of wisdoms? Like, Jason, this has been a pleasure talking. Like, we could go on for hours, but for the sake of the listeners, what's any final words? Anything that you want to leave the audience with?
Try not to sound like a broken record, but be the change you want to see. It's corny. It is what it is, but like whatever that is, you really put your time and efforts into it. Be excellent and try to do those things. So that I guess that would be my last ones is be that. Again, as we've spoken so much. And if we have 1 minute, I kind of do want to talk a little bit about the fun that we're doing now, but towards the end. But for me, this topic of race and what it means for society is just so important. Mm-hmm. So I guess I just continue to just ask people to really think about what that means and look around and decide, like, do you think this is okay? And if it's not, if you think it's okay, then hey, damn. If you don't, what are you doing? And, volunteering is great. Donating some money is great. But like, where are opportunities that you have a leadership capacity to be changed? And that could be corporate, community. So I've said that a bunch of times, but it really, really matters to me because I think it's what we see going on right now is deplorable in a lot of different places. And I'll go there. So yeah.
For me, the one thing that I practice is be the change is always listen like you're wrong. Even if you think you're right, always listen like you're wrong. And you can't go wrong when you listen like you're wrong, because then you're open to suggestions and different perspectives and different views. And that in itself makes you a better listener and a better problem solver, in my opinion. So.
Yes. Yeah.
With that said, Jason, thank you very much for a very intentional conversation. We should ask, what I'll ask the editing team is to say, okay, how many times was the word intentional said in this podcast? Yeah, intentional.
Yeah. My daughter is going to really hate me for saying it all the time, but as soon as she learns the word, I'm going to be,
intentional in telling her that she has to use it.
She's gonna learn. Like, hey, if you want this, let's put it in and let's think about it. Just accidents don't happen that often. Or positive accidents don't happen. Things just don't happen very often. So
I agree.
It'll be funny. She's gonna get mad at me because I'm gonna be like, hey, spelling bee, let's get it. But it's gonna be fun.
Well, thank you very much, Jason, for being on the show. It was lovely to have you on.
Thank you. This is a pleasure. Have a good one.
Yeah. Fabulous. Thank you. With that said, my name is Martin Hunter. I am the host of What CEOs Talk About. And I didn't forget this time. Please like, subscribe, and I always forget the third one. Anyway, share. That's what it is. All right. With that said, thank you very much, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to What CEOs Talk About. Make sure to click subscribe to get notified about future episodes, or check us out at www.whatceostalkabout.com.